All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Two Grad Studio. So, this week we are going to be taking a deeper dive into imposter syndrome. We briefly brought up imposter syndrome during last week's episode when we were talking about some of the systemic barriers to being able to access the appropriate mental, social support that we need when as mental health students are in our practicums. So this week we wanted to get a lot more into that emotional side of things and talk about a vulnerable topic, which is imposter syndrome. So, imposter syndrome can be described as the immense amount of self-doubt that a person can have when they are entering into a career, or it could even be, at the middle stage of a career. But it's a lot of that self-doubt and fear of failure that comes in when you are kind of in a new position or in learning new things. So, a lot of people who can experience this imposter syndrome feel like frauds. They feel like they are undeserving of their accomplishments, and they don't feel as if they are as competent or have as much intelligence as other people who are in their position. So, I kind of wanted to get the conversation started by just talking about our experiences getting into the mental health field. So, for me personally, I started out in a corporate background. So, my bachelor's degree was in business psychology, and then I went into the more corporate HR side of things as a recruiter and was doing recruiting in healthcare settings and within school settings. However, I had always had a passion for being able to work one on one with people and being able to really work intimately with them and getting to know the different stresses in their lives and being able to build that connection with one another. Um, so, this is my first time being in a clinical setting. And it's my first time really working one on one with clients in a way that is impactful to their daily lives and to their everyday mental health. So that's a little bit about my background. Hearn, take it away and tell us a little bit about your entry into this field.
Yeah, absolutely. So originally, I knew I wanted to work in a helping profession. The first I started going into like nursing to be a registered RN. So I have like the health sciences background. Kind of left that pretty early on because I struggled with like the rogue memorization of like physio. There's some other classes that were a lot of fun. And so I switched into psychology. I have an associate's, my bachelor's, get my master's, obviously. And from a work experience side, I initially got into education, working as an English teacher, and then moved into post-crisis acute mental health care. Pretty much working inside of behavioral health hospitals or psych wards is more identifiable to general audience.
Awesome.
And it was doing a lot of the direct client care, making sure that they're staying safe. Did that for about 2 years there, give or take. Then I switched over into a group clinician role, focusing on the benefits of like leisure and recreation to manage stress and to manage symptoms. And now for our practicum work, I do individual therapy with, it's not with a lower acuity population inside Sacramento.
Yeah, thanks for telling us a little bit about your background. I think it's really important to get to know kind of where we're coming in from or the experiences that we're coming in from, because that really shapes how we experience our practicum and the types of feelings that might compound into this imposter syndrome when we were entering this field. So, for example, I didn't have that much. actual experience working with patients, working with clients. I did not have a clinical background whatsoever. So I feel like entering into my practicum was like entering a whole new world and entering a whole new set of responsibilities that I immediately felt unprepared for. It was super difficult to, I guess, bridge the knowledge that I had learned in school and actually getting to a place of applying that. And I think, especially being in a new position of, interacting with clients that have, trauma backgrounds or that
Mhm.
have intense symptomologies and really feeling some of them are suicidal or need safety plans and getting into that kind of environment and something that felt so high stakes was really difficult for my personal feelings of imposter syndrome. So, and I feel like it really differed from my previous experiences of it. So, previous experiences of imposter syndrome, maybe in college or in my first few jobs, were more related to like, okay, I've never kind of been in this environment and I've maybe never done the work before. But I feel like I had a lot more confidence in my capabilities to do the work and to implement things, or at least on a daily basis, be like, okay, I accomplished X, Y, and Z, and
Mhm.
I can call that a day. And then coming into this position or coming into the practicum experience, I feel like the imposter syndrome has hit me so much more emotionally and has really, really taken a hit to my confidence and the way that I am the way that I have that self assurance about myself, not only in my job or in my professional career, but it's really bleeding over into my personal life also. And feeling that anxiety and feeling that that constant feeling of like, oh my gosh, I'm drowning in this new thing and I'm so afraid of making a mistake. So I kind of wanted to know how did you maybe experience imposter syndrome before and during your current practicum?
Yeah, so definitely when I first started in inpatient behavioral health, I felt that the imposter syndrome of like, what am I doing? I am working with people twice my age. I'm like, I said at this point in time, I was like 24, 25. And it's okay, I'm pretty much freshly out of school. I've barely done anything. It's like, what am I doing? And for me, it was recognizing that no one sees the like, my internal process that I'm going through. Only I am seeing and experiencing that unless I'm actively doing things that are showing that
Mhm.
I am like having an issue. No one's gonna really notice. And it was using my background as a stage performer that I
Oh,
think
cool.
really kind of helped to work with this fake it till you make it
Mhm.
perspective as the no one knows the mistakes you make while doing a performance unless you tell them. And if you can just roll with what happens, it'll seem like it's all part of the production.
Mhm. I love
And I
that.
think like this is a failing of our programs, I think, because no one talks about bridging or bridging skills into
Mhm.
our work in any industry, honestly, but like in mental health care even more so, it's the like, oh, be yourself. It's the let yourself show through, be authentic. It's the yeah, that's cool, but first I need to put on the act, the performance, until that confidence builds up because I think advice from my supervisor kind of comes to mind. It's the action action precedes motivation. In this case, like our action precedes our confidence in doing the action. We gotta
Mhm.
do, we gotta feel shaky, but no one talks about how to like, no, you have the skills already. Like,
Mhm.
what's everything you've done in your life? Okay, see, that right there, that's a useful thing. We can bring that in. We can bring this in to help us create our initial clinical identity that will slowly fade away as we build our confidence and a more genuine self kind of comes through.
Yeah, I really like how you were able to really lean on your prior experiences that weren't necessarily related to mental health and bring that in and really lean on that as part of who you are and really bringing in that personal aspect to your work. I feel like that is so important in being
Hmm.
able to establish your sense of self and really bring that confidence back at the very least to be like, okay, I know that I can rely on, even if I can't rely on what I know right now as a mental health practitioner, I can rely on what I knew when I was in theater. And I can rely on kind of who I became through that. And I feel like that really like starts to bring back that confidence that you even just feel in yourself. You know, it doesn't need to be your confidence in your skills as a practitioner, but just being able to instill that hope and that self-assurance that you have for yourself, I feel like is so important. And I feel like that was a lot of what was really difficult for me in the beginning of my practicum was it was really hard for me to feel like I had experience that was relevant and like important and that I could properly bring into the therapeutic space. So my practicum is working with children, and schooling did not prepare me for that at all. I think through our entire required coursework, we have one class that is specifically targeted towards working with children. And I wasn't even in that class until after I started my practicum. So I feel like I was
Hmm.
really going into it being like, I have no idea what skills I have to work with this population. I don't know everything about how I've been taught to talk to patients and how to approach them and how to build rapport and everything. It felt so different now applying that to a whole population that I had never really thought about or that I had never practiced those skills with. And again, like coming from a position where I didn't have that much experience working with kids or working in mental health, I was like, I feel like I didn't have a lot of those things to lean on when it came to what I was confident about. Um, and then honestly, like that part, I feel like ended up becoming okay. Like once you kind of get through the tough part and once you kind of just you have to feel the uncomfortable emotions and you have to, just kind of let yourself go through that process to really understand yourself and get to that like greater self-awareness. And so doing that when it came to working with the patients and working with um, the kids was great. And I feel like I was able to build my confidence in terms of my approaching skills and rapport skills really quickly. But I feel like another thing with imposter syndrome is that I guess it had a lot of layers. And at the beginning, it was really hard for me to properly label it as that. I'd heard about it before and I was like, no, you know what? Like, I don't think it's that because like I'm not, I don't feel like I'm undeserving of this position. I know that I went through the education for it. I know that in theory I do have the necessary knowledge and things like that. But when it came to actually doing it, there were so many more layers that came with it where I was just like, I feel like I'm not getting the right information that I need. I think that I'm not understanding the process. I think even more so than just not necessarily feeling like I had the knowledge of the practical skills or the therapeutic skills necessary. But I feel like I was really struggling with understanding the process. And because I didn't have enough of that support, I wasn't able to understand the consequences of certain things. So, for example,
Hmm.
if a note was turned in late, or if I had made a mistake on some kind of report. For me, it felt like such a catastrophic event where I was like, I just screwed this whole thing up. because I feel like I didn't have enough information on, okay, here is what happens. Like, here are what our timelines are. Here is what is absolutely needing to happen. Here's what we can fix. Here's what's flexible. Um, and I feel like kind of getting that information sometimes, I felt brushed off, where it was like anytime that I had voiced that I didn't feel like the amount of knowledge that I had was enough, both in therapeutic skills and in terms of the process for the site specifically. I feel like it was kind of like, oh no, don't worry about it. That's just something that happens to everyone. That's the imposter syndrome that happens to everyone. And then nothing kind of ever came of that except the fact that it was my responsibility and solely my responsibility to deal with my own emotions. And that was the only solution. So, I guess, did you feel comfortable leaning on your supervisor and your site for support? What was their kind of reaction, and was there things that were helpful or unhelpful about it?
Yeah, with my side, it was fair with how my supervisor has it structured.
Mhm.
It's meant to be a mentorship in owning a private practice while also being a way to get my practicum hours. So my onboarding process was very much take it at my own speed. Like, here is the Google Drive that has every document that you will possibly need to like run for working at this agency, as well as all kinds of like educational resources that I wish I had more time to kind of dig into to build
Mhm.
clinical skill before starting everything, but I just did it between school, work, and that to like really sit with it as much as I'd like.
Yeah.
As for the support from my supervisor, she is very much available for crisis. Like if a problem is happening, she is there, she is on it. And mm, there's less receptiveness to like that feeling of like, oh, I'm a fraud, I'm a fake, I'm an imposter, because she is on that position of you are 3 years deep in a
Mhm.
master's level program. The you have gone the and I want to hire you on. You have made it through every filter, barrier, both personal and systemic, that there is to be here talking about how you're concerned. And that concern is a good thing.
Mhm.
That means you are aware when you make a mistake and you'll do things to fix that deal.
Okay.
And if it's like a issue in like, oh, I'm working with a client and I mess up an intervention, see, most clients don't know the interventions. And we exist in a skewed perception because I
Mhm.
know my like Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook are all kinds of full of mental health professionals, mental health topics. And so it's like, oh, it's much more like there's much more awareness. It's like, no, no, no. See, your perception is there's more awareness.
Mhm.
The general population does not have that same awareness. And even if they do, most clients, even though we try to foster a, we're both experts here, they're not going to call you out for messing up an intervention.
Mhm.
Or lean on policies. Well, this is how we handle this procedure at this agency. This is our flavor of this thing.
Mhm. Did you enjoy having, or do you enjoy having that kind of approach to it, or do you kind of wish that you had more of that, kind of like more of that emotional support from her?
Mm, I would say it was good for me to not have it, even though I wanted emotional reassurance.
Okay.
And because like the emotional research feels nice,
Mhm.
but it's not going to help me be a better clinician.
Yeah, very fair. I actually like that perspective because again, when I'm kind of thinking about it, when I'm thinking about my own personal experiences, I'm like, yeah, like that was kind of one of the things that I had gone in feeling like, when they had asked me, so what are you kind of looking for in your supervisor relationship? Where do you feel like your strengths are? What are you kind of needing? I feel like I was very upfront in being like, because I don't have a lot of experience in this field, and this is my first time really practicing a lot of these skills and implementing these things. I was like, I actually did need that emotional, I needed that validation, or I needed that reassurance, and I needed more of those external voices, I guess, to say like, okay, it's maybe not all in your head, or it is all in your head. I feel like
Hmm.
if for me it was really difficult, or I was in a position where I couldn't necessarily separate my thoughts um of like, okay, this is like an emergency situation. This is okay. This is something that you can kind of handle on your own, whatever it was. And I think that I definitely tried to not lean on my supervisor for those things as much. And I tried to lean on peers or maybe my own personal network a lot more. But I definitely feel like I needed to have those conversations with my supervisor, and not being able to maybe get those things was really frustrating in the beginning, even though maybe like a few months into it, I might have understood, like, okay, yeah, maybe it wasn't necessarily something that they needed to spend an entire supervision session on or something like that. Maybe the reason why
Hmm.
they said those things and then kind of kept the conversation brief about it was because, they knew in a few months that it wouldn't be as prevalent of a thing, or it wouldn't be as necessary. And they didn't necessarily, like, they didn't want to set up the precedent that I could just run to them every single time that I needed it. So I definitely think that I appreciate like getting your perspective and also seeing the difference in maybe like personality, or like the things that we needed out of the experiences differs, and why it's so
Hmm.
important to be able to kind of have those at least conversations with your supervisor where things are being tailored, or even when it comes to the search for a practicum site, these are things to be looking out for in terms of who do you what type of traits do you know that you have, like going into this kind of like new thing? How are you already feeling about it? Like assess that, like what kind of support do you feel like you're going to need, and being able to communicate those things and be like, okay, like if I think I was in that position when I was looking through practicum sites where I was in between two. One seemed like they had a lot more involved supervisors and people to help available, versus another one was going to be a lot more individual and didn't have as much access to a supervisor. And it was more for kind of like emergency consultations or crisis situations. And then that was something that I didn't feel comfortable with. I was like, no, I know myself and I know that I'm going to need some extra support here, things like that. So I like being able to kind of get those different perspectives. So you kind of mentioned that for your supervisor, she does encourage you to lean on your peers, or kind of lean on other people in your support network,
Hmm.
in order to kind of process these feelings. And also, one of the pillars to overcoming imposter syndrome is really understanding that you're not the only person going through it. And, that there are other people who might have been in your situation, or who've experienced this before and have been able to make it out the other side. So, do you feel like it's been, I guess, easy to lean on your network? Do you feel like it's been encouraged with your peers or with your coworkers to talk about these things? And, I guess, what have you learned from those conversations?
Yeah, so my supervisor has definitely been encouraging of lean on peers, reach out, talk to them. They have experiences you don't have that can help you.
Mhm.
And Mm. For me, it's a struggle because I like to keep healthy boundaries between all of my things. I like things to be separate. We do this thing this day, these things these days, or these things at these times.
Mm,
And part of that is, okay, well, where do I find time to reach out to my peers while not taking time from other things because I'm trying to juggle a lot of different things,
mhm,
which makes it a challenge, at least for me, to make the time.
mhm. Yeah.
But it is definitely an important skill, at least like my own personal development, clinical development, honestly, at this point, is to remember that I do have coworkers that I can talk to, I can reach out to when there's a challenge, there's a unique situation that they may be more familiar in.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that because, when I was thinking about just this question in general, I was like, is it easy for you to engage in these conversations? And kind of where I was coming from that was I, work in person and there are a lot of other clinicians who are on site and a lot of us are constantly talking or kind of like uh doing many consultations all around the place. So I feel like it's a very like communicative environment for our practicum, but at the same time, a lot of that consultation time is spent for client things. There's not a lot of time to be able to engage in those personal conversations for like clinician development or yeah, for that clinical development. So when I was thinking about that question, I was thinking about kind of how it doesn't necessarily feel as encouraged, or you really have to go out of the time that's built for practicum in order to seek that support from those peers and coworkers and other people who might be in the field. But I like how you kind of mentioned the time thing also, because that is another barrier, the fact that like we talked about during our last episode, but the fact that there is school, there is work, there is practicum on top of that, there are personal responsibilities on top of that. As students, we like in this position, we're expected to be doing so much already with not enough time ever, it feels like. And even though this is a time where we're really supposed to be focused on our professional development and really being able to spend the time within ourselves to go through this emotional process, go through this development, really have a lot of like reflection time. It feels like this is the time where we have the least amount of opportunity to do
Mm.
so because there's so much else going on. So, even if it's, encouraged by a site to be able to like engage in these conversations, it's not always easy because there's just no time. And once again, it becomes something that is solely a personal responsibility instead of something that feels like we're allowed that support going into this position. So it really just adds to those systemic barriers and those systemic challenges that we're experiencing in terms of being able to enter a field like this and be able to really do that development so that we are feeling confident as clinicians and capable and um, really, yeah, being able to fully go through this process and feel good about it, not feel anxious, not feel stressed, not feel like we're transferring everything to all of our clients because we don't have time to maybe emotionally process it yourself. So
Oh,
so yeah,
100%.
thank you for bringing that up. So I guess to kind of wrap up our conversation, is there any kind of support that hasn't been mentioned yet that you feel like would be necessary or it would be helpful for other practicum students who are going through these emotions. Is there anything that you found that's either personally helpful or something that other people have said has worked that you feel like is really important to being able to help go through this kind of emotional process and emotional development?
That is a great question. I think, mm, definitely my previous background with like stage performance was helpful in navigating my early imposter syndrome.
Mhm.
And not everyone's gonna do like 2 years of performing arts. That's fine. It's intense, but try an improv class, or at
Oh.
least practice like the yes and, because that helps us also to practice the skills to just sit and witness a client having issues. It's like, yeah, so you're having that problem, Steve. And what about that? It helps us with a very basic prompt. Also, if you don't have a anything to say, so you just ask why.
Mhm.
Having these basic tools to keep the client talking helps us to make time to think and to come up with like the next piece that we could say to them when we just kind of go wide-eyed, empty-headed because we're
Mhm.
feeling under the pressure.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's amazing advice. And I like that it's also not something that is um like 100% related or in mental health, because I think that it's important to also be able to take breaks away from this field and really like take your mind out of it sometimes to be able to recharge yourself, trying new things and just kind of being able to do things for your own enjoyment also is so important in being able to build those personal skills within yourself and building that confidence within yourself. So absolutely. I was going to say, kind of along the similar lines of like exposing yourself to kind of something different is really like kind of connecting with people who aren't in the field. So I remember one of the most impactful conversations that I had in being able to kind of settle my anxiety and settle my imposter syndrome when it was at its height was talking to one of my friends who's in law. And I have never necessarily connected the two in terms of like job responsibilities or anything like that. Even though we obviously work with lawyers in our field of work, it wasn't
Hmm.
something that I found was super directly. Like I never thought that I would talk to my law school friends about certain things that would, really connect on that level. But they also kind of, or my friend had a similar kind of practicum or kind of clinical traineeship program. Um, and was experiencing a lot of the same emotions. And for me to kind of have someone that was in a different field and also being able to understand the struggles that they went through and being able to see like, okay, this is, really much like an across the board type of thing and not something that is like personally just in my head or just in this field or just in my workplace, being able to really understand this as a holistic experience and really just expose myself to different information, a different world, like even learning that in law school there is the same kind of like internship trainee types of programs where my friend was also like, yeah, I felt responsible for these people's lives because the consequences were huge. And I was like, yeah, being able to talk to someone that maybe understand that severity or kind of that feeling of things being really high stakes and being able to connect on those emotions on a deeper way, even if they were not in relation to the exact same thing, was super, super important. And yeah, just taking myself out of this like therapy space where I was constantly just like ruminating in my head for so long
Hmm.
was I feel like so important just to like bring me, just to ground me again in the experiences of everyone and what everyone else is going through. So yeah, well, thank you so much for talking to me about imposter syndrome. I hope that for all of our listeners, I hope that you were able to take something away that might have been able to help or given you some new ideas on how you might be able to kind of build your confidence if you're going through a tough time in your practicum situation right now. So thank you so much, and this may be our final episode, but stay tuned for more information. Thank you.